And hello there, we are again with another episode of Dance Jams. Today we are going to talk about space time, the invisible dimension. My name is Shaw, and I would never do a podcast without my good friend and colleague Ton Greten, all the way from the Netherlands. Ton, are you there?
I'm there, Sean. Hi, Sean.
How
Nice to meet you
nice
on
to meet
our
you.
rainy day in the Netherlands.
It's a rainy day.
Oh,
Oops, and the phone is going. All right, we are going to talk about space time today, Ton. I call it the invisible dimension uh, because for a lot of people, maybe space time as one word might be something new, but maybe not. Let's find out. And what has that all to do with dancing, of course, right? What do you think?
a lot. Everything space time to do with dancing, but also in general with sports, with everything in your life, also
Hmm.
in your office, everything. And once will see how we see it, you can also use it in your advantage.
Okay,
It's
for dance. Yeah. Well, let's
Yeah,
explore
for
where that
mainly for
is.
dance.
Yeah,
Yes.
well, let's explore where that is coming from. Space time.
Uh, yeah, you have two things: space and time. And when you put them together, you get space time from Herman Minovsky. He comes from Lithuania, and actually he is Russian uh, before because it was Russia, and then it got Lithuania, and he taught in Austria, in Vienna, on the university, and one of his students was Albert Einstein. And you have I think I say it well, the Minovsky space uh,
Dimension, yeah. Minos.
dimension.
Yeah.
That's actually something what he mentioned as one of the first. It's already older, this concept. It's already from the Greece, uh, thousands of years ago, but still, from there, Albert Einstein made the relative theory, and uh, this we will explain a little bit later. But yes, very, very interesting, Sean, how you can use that in dance. I didn't know that we could use it because before, a few years ago, even, I use it as a single part, everything space and time. But you cannot move through space without to use a certain duration or to move in a certain tempo. And this is really interesting. And this was the first time when I saw it from Hermann Minovsky because I thought always was from Albert Einstein. And yes, it is, but he built on the knowledge of Hermann Minovsky. And I saw a few videos, but it was so complex, Sean. Um, but now I understand it. But it needed really a long time to see it, and still it's complex for me sometimes. But for dancing, I can use it in a simple way, how I understand it, and yeah, interesting. So, what you know about it, Sean?
Well, you know, as a young kid, I was always interested in traveling in space, right? And I was dreaming about going from Earth to, let's say, the next solar system or the next, planet system, because I knew already about the solar system and our own planets. And then, I grew up when I was in my teens when we would fly to the moon. Still, some people believe really didn't happen, but that's a whole different story. But then I read an article in a popular magazine, magazine for youth people, that the next solar system moves faster away from us than we can travel, and that was for me so incredible weird to understand. I didn't even know that the planets, the solar systems outside our own solar system would move away from us. That was already something to think about. And then the article told also about that we can move forward in time, but we can never move backward in time. And that actually caught my attention. That for things that moves very fast, time goes slower. And that's when then it's for the first time I heard, I was maybe 14 years old, that there was a relationship between time and space, and the faster we move, the slower we age. So, you know, reading about it later and later, I started to discover that people, if you live on the top of the Himalaya, you actually age slower than when you move close to the center of the earth. And you actually nowadays with your normal phone, you can actually measure that, believe it or not. In the past, you need to have very things like that. And of course, as a dance teacher, I started to think a little bit more about space and time. And that's how I discovered it. But also, like you, I thought the relativity theory from Einstein was from Einstein itself. And of course, he made it famous and did a lot to it.
Sorry.
And yeah, no worries. But yeah, he of course also had teachers, and Herman Minovsky probably also had teachers and groups that they discuss with. But yeah, space time as a concept is also known as Herman Minovsky's fourth dimension. Interesting as that is. But we always, if we start to move, we move always in a certain duration, in a certain time. Only if you don't move, but even then you move because we are on a planet and we always move. And so these two things are, and that was what Herman Manowski said, these two things, you cannot disconnect those two things.
Ye- yes. Very interesting and something funny, Sean.
Hmm.
From the solar, how you say,
Solar systems, yeah.
systems, I didn't know that. So thanks, Sean. I'll I learned again something from your information. Very interesting, but something funny in your daily life. People say sometimes to me, "I don't have time," and I say
Yes.
to them, "You have always time."
Yeah.
Then they look really strange to me. I said, "It's a point of taking priorities." No, no, I don't have time. I say, just listen and put your attention to it, what I say. Time is always there.
Hmm.
You cannot catch it. So it's a point of your priorities. That's it. And
That's
some
it.
people, yeah, and people argue about
Argue.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yes. And I say it's just where you put your focus on, and exactly also in dancing. So we go slowly to dancing, but first to explain all these dimensions. And starting with the first, we see it as wide, the second as long, the third as high, and the fourth, actually, it's coming not from me, from Herman Minovsky, the fourth would be time.
Yeah.
And we put a fifth one to it, or and this is the fifth dimension. This is your conscious. And as a dancer, is it important that not only your conscious but also your body, because you cannot separate them. So your whole being is your five dimension, your fifth dimension, and this can fill in the other four dimensions. And actually, it's everything theory, because you have actually only two dimension, and that's space and that's time. What we call also the first and the second, because the first and the second are more theoretical model. And Sean, tell me about that one, because
Yeah, from
you
a
told me that.
mathematical, yes, from a mathematical point of view, we say that a point would be a first dimension. But if you zoom in on a point nowadays, we can do that. You will see that the point is at least two dimensions, which is width and height, or width and length. I should say. So we say in mathematics or geometry that is a two-dimensional model, right? But of course, if you even ink has three dimensions. So once I talked to a professor, Jean-Marie Lebord, he unfortunately passed away, quite recently is why do we teach students that they don't see in the world, right? They see the world three dimensional. How is it possible that we teach them first a two-dimensional model? I think that that kind of screws up, excuse me, French, right? A children's brain. And he said, "Yeah, Sean, you're exactly right. That is actually very unnatural, you know." And in this case, I used that correctly to use a two-dimensional model because you ask something from a student to kind of imagine what is actually not cannot be really found in real life. Two dimension does not really exist. You know, even a painting on the wall, if you zoom in on it, it has three dimensions. So that was it. Plus, the second thing he said, which was interesting for you and me as well, is it's these lengths and stuff like that. We always look at it if we can have a frontal look at it, but everything changes, right, when you change your perspective. So a three-dimensional model helps you to see things from different perspective, and three-dimensional model helps you to see things from different perspective, and a two-dimensional model cannot do that. Which is interesting to understand. Now, people might argue with that. That's all okay. This is all mathematical theory, of course. But it is actually true that we always live in a three-dimensional world where space and time is there. So that would be four, right? And then, of course, your conscious is always there. So that would be fifth. And the first two are theoretical models. That's a little bit where that's coming from. Very interesting or not interesting. But and I'll tell you a little bit more about the scientific proof that we found in the last 30 years about the conscious mind and how that influences our physical world. You have your microphone off, Ton, or your.
Yes, the microphone off. Sorry, Sean. Um, Maybe we have one word for it. When I say body,
Mm-hmm.
then I mean the physical part and the mental part, both together. The whole concept of the human body
Being, yeah.
being, and this I call actually the fifth dimension, because with you, with your being, you can create the other parts in volume and in duration with your 10 body parts. And each body part could have a different use of duration or tempo and a different use of the volumes. And the volumes in that case would be space, because space, we have also a few other things in space, not only the directions in length or wide or high or low, but also the negative space and the positive space, Sean. And we didn't mention that. And the pathways, the geometric pathways, the straight pathways, and the organic pathways. We mentioned that also in the Dutch podcast, but we didn't spoke about the negative and positive one. So we will do this in the English one. Very, very interesting. All these kind of words, what the connection is with space. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm a big Marvel fan, and it and there is a, you know, and I was a fan. My number one heroes told were Spider-Man, but the second one were the Fantastic Four. And the
Yes,
Fantastic
yes.
Four, there was a
I too.
scientist, yeah, there was a scientist in there called Reed Richards, and Reed Richards was also talking about the negative space, and he had a door into the negative space. That is not the negative space we talk about. There's nothing mysterious about it, you know. It is what we talk as dancers about the negative and the positive space is this, you know, where is our body in, and the space between our body parts would then be the negative space. Some people have a little bit of hard time with that word because they think
Yeah.
like uh, negative and positive as good and bad, right? But it has nothing to do with good and bad. It
N-
is, yeah. So in my early lessons from this in Laban theory, it is we can shape with our own body. We can imaginary shape the negative space as well. So that's what we mean with negative and positive space.
Yeah, when I put my hand on my head and the gap what I have here,
Is the negative space.
that's a negative space. But it gets more
Hmm.
confusing when you would be the negative, then this could be the positive because you use it.
Yes, it's the
So you can
space you
also
use.
turn it around. Hmm?
Yeah, it's the space you use. Yeah. Yeah, I can see why some people, because in day to day life we use the word negative and positive often as good and bad. But if you think about electricity, a battery has a positive and a negative side, and neither one side is better than the other. One side cannot live without the other. You know, there is no battery with two positive sides because that would not be a battery, right? So, which is actually thought has nothing to do with space and time, but it's literally what you and I always try to do to stay away from those subjective ways of thinking. There is no positive, so the positive space could not exist without the negative space. Um,
Yes. It's actually a two model way how to use it. You can turn
yep,
it around, or
yep,
it's how
yep.
you want to interpret that there is two. Something is fulfilled with you or with an object, and around it's there, and it's still empty. There are molecules in it, but you cannot see them or you cannot perceive them. But if you use the negative as positive as a word, there are two models then there in it.
Yeah.
And actually, as a dancer, to use that, that's a really nice thought because the gaps, when I have gaps here, I will make a circle now with my fingers together. So, and open the fingers here.
Nice.
So the space in between.
Yep,
Yes, you can use this and close that
yep.
and bring this together, everything, but still there will be always some negative. Even when you close it very, very hard, I
Hmm.
have still a small gap in it.
Yeah, always, always. And
Y-
that's, I mean, one of my early teachers who said, when you look at a chair, some eyes are a little bit more focused on literally the material that makes the chairs, but other eyes are a little bit more focused on the area that is bounded by the chair. So yeah, depends on what perspective you have. There you have the word again, then from a different perspective you could call that negative or positive space. And from a physics point of view, by the way, actually, if you look at everything, there is we have only 0.000% is filled
Yes,
up in space. So it's
yes,
most of the things is actually space and not matter. That is
y-
a little bit what it is, even
y-
in our body, which is of course a little bit. Um,
yes. But we speak then about micro and macro space and micro and macro and timing
yeah,
because this word hopefully is familiar for you. um, you because this is why the ships, how you call that, the in the computers,
a chip, yeah,
yeah, a
yeah,
ship,
yeah,
they get
chip.
smaller and smaller and smaller and faster and faster and faster. Not the chip by themselves gets faster, but the space get more narrow and
Hmm.
the pathways on that chip get more closer to each other and different materials so that the information go more fast through it. It's really incredible, and you can only make them with really special equipment. But compared to dancing, we have also pathways there, like on a ship. We call it floor pathway and air pathway. So air, it's all the body parts who are static on the place and move through space in any direction, up, down, left, right, behind, forward, but also the floor pathway is the pathway on the floor. When you look from up, it's two-dimensional, but actually we told everything is three-dimensional. But when you move from A to B in space in any direction, we call it floor pathway. And mostly is this with the feet, but sometimes you can walk also on the hand and feet. Then it's a floor pathway. And when I move the head, then it's free. Then it's an air pathway. So you can also combine these two models, air pathway and floor pathway, in a geometric way, in a direct way, and an indirect way that we call it organic way. And organic is everything not so straight like the geometric, because the geometric is very direct. And this makes it more mechanically also in space when you move only through space in a geometric way. And yes, it's beautiful to understand space that it has more elements in it.
Yeah. So in older dance theory, we talked about pathways as well, and they try to describe it between straight line and curves and zigzags and circles and random or erratic. So you see that's almost an endless word. So Ton in his method Dance Gems actually made it a little bit easier to understand. You have geometric pathways, which are straight lines, but also clear circles. But when it's less defined, it is organic. That's an organic way of looking at things. So instead of trying to uh, mention all these pathways, it's easier to think about in that way. And if you listen to our podcast, and I hope you do, try to remember these two words, organic and geometric, because we'll come back on these words. And in previous podcasts, we also have these words, and there are a couple of words. In this case, these words has more to do with the space time we talk about, right? And it helps you at some point in time to really almost decode movement. And that's actually the whole goal of it, is to decode movement. We're not talking about a rumba or a hip hop. We're talking about movement in the form of dance, which is an art form, which in art has a lot to do with creativity. And so that's that. But what there is
Yeah.
also an imaginary lines. You talked about that too, an imaginary pathway. Tom, what is that?
Yes, we have
Yeah,
that's a pathway where you think to the future where you want to go
yeah,
to that point exactly in space where you want to reach. So now I'm close here to my body, so
yeah.
I will reach out to you, and this imaginary line I imagine to the camera go forward. This is the future pathway, actually. That's imaginary. So you think that it's there. And there is another theoretic model is the pathway what goes and continues more out of your body. You reach to your maximum.
Yeah,
I will do it here. No, it's difficult to do for the camera.
it is.
Um, um, and the maximum reach, you imagine that will the line will like a laser beam will
Will continue.
continue.
Continue. Yeah. In Laban theory, that's called projection. You project something
Project.
in front. And
Yeah.
so you can also imagine that you leave some sort of a trail behind you. It's also
Yes.
imaginary, but like it's like the pathway that you walked over stays for a moment in time, and it lingers
Yes.
there. Yeah.
Yeah. The nice and the beauty thing of it is when you walk through sand on your bare feet
Yes. That's a good
and you would
example.
look and you would look backwards,
Yeah.
then you could see the line what you had walked.
Yeah.
But the one it's not in front of you, you can create and interpret it however it will be. And that's the beauty of it because that space is still not used and is negative. The one where you walked through,
What's
that
kind of
was positive
Yeah.
and get
Oh, yeah.
again negative.
Yeah, I like the scent example. We never talked about it, but if you think about scent, we think that now that trail stays there forever, but it's not, because time and space takes over, and bit by bit, that trail, goes away. It's a really
Yeah.
nice thing we could maybe do about it. So the
Mm.
for me, Ton, the importance of pathway and dance is, it asks a little bit different spatial awareness. Where do you go to? Where you come from? Right? That's one thing. And if you do that in a certain way, it has a visual impact not only on yourself, but also on the viewers and your fellow dancers. So, and through that, you can use it in an abstract way, but you can also use it in a storytelling way if you want to, right? Not everything has to be a story in my mind. And I think it creates a different interaction with both the audience, the space around you, and the dancers around you. So those are the four things that I often talk about uh,
Mm.
when I talk about the importance of pathways in dance.
Yes, I have to cough.
You have to cough. Yeah.
I did, and I put the sound off. So that was clever. I thought
Yeah.
already into the future that it will disturb you, probably. Yes, it's also through space and time where you want to put the attention to, Sean. That's a quite important thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I go a little bit back what I want to say with that one. We
Mm-hmm.
have our conscious, and we can bring our focus to a point and give attention to it. What has this to do with space time? So I will explain that one. Uh, we people perceive the information from inside and outside, and 90% it's interpretation and aanvullen. Hoe heet dat? Yeah, I don't know the English word, but we interpretate 90%, and our attention is 90% on a different place than the other human being. We have some 10% overlap, and to give a judgment, people don't know that, but we can never see and listen because you do this with your brain, and the eyes and the ears are your instrument and your feeling. We can never see at the same moment in time, at that moment in space, exactly the same things. Maybe there is an overlap of 10%, but people think even in the science that it is more or less than that.
Yeah,
And you had,
it is less
yeah,
than that.
yeah,
Only theoretical, we can, we can see it at exactly the same time, because I'm at a different point in space. So before the light hits me, it hits me at a different moment in time. So that's so Albert Einstein used that theory a lot, to help us explain that. So when we see something, it is when the light hits you. That's a little bit how it is. If I
yes,
am,
and it,
and
yes,
yeah,
and it's also the perspective where you are at that moment. You said
yeah,
it already. Hmm.
yeah. And since Ton and I can never be literally at the same at the same spot at the same time, even if we are super close together, it's impossible to occupy the same space at the same time. We can never see it at the same time, but it's of course
No,
also a thinking model, and it's for humans almost impossible to do. But the first thing you said is very interesting, Tom, is typically what we see, because of our conscious mind, we fill in a lot of what we see
yes,
because of our biases, our culture, what we have learned, what we have experienced, what we assume. All these kind of things fill in what we see.
yes, that was
And
a word I was looking for, Sean.
that's
Yeah, you
okay.
helped me now.
Yeah, we fill in what we see. Also, that when we do that with our students, that leads always to very exciting discussions. um,
Yes, but very interesting, Sean, because we fill everything in.
Mhm.
Also in the lessons, or when you are at school or at work or on a dance competition or in a theater or you look to television, most of information you will miss, really. And also because you fill it in and you interpret it also differently than the
Mhm.
person next to you, it need a lot of focus and attention. I give some examples, Sean. um, there are many experiments with it. So when you on the bathroom and there is a brush for your toothbrush, a small one, and people they asked, "Can you find a toothbrush?" Yes, I can find. And all the people look to a um, small toothbrush because your expectation is a toothbrush, sorry, has to be small. But when the next to one there is a big one, 1 meter tall, they don't see it because our brain is not practiced on to see everything. So when the artificial intelligence would look to it, they would see or perceive immediately the big one and the small one. But our brain cannot catch that. And also, we have a big house number, like almost 2 meters big. And before we didn't had a small one. And people ask where was number eight because we live on number eight. I say it's here. It's almost 2 meter big. Ah, I didn't see it because the brain was focused on a small one. And this is why we fill it in. And the same happened on a dance competition or in a theater when we look to dance. We can only look to it with the information what we have learned in the past, with the baggage what we have. And then we give a judgment to it, and then we think, yeah, we are right. But you look at from a different perspective than the next one what next to you is sitting. So they perceive already the information differently because they are sitting in a different space. And they look at also in a different time. And now I will also explain what um, Hermann Minovsky said with it and Albert Einstein. Because Albert Einstein, the relativity theory, say it already. But if you don't know what it is, you will not understand it now what I said. Maybe Sean, you can clarify it, or I can continue.
Yeah. So in short, is actually you cannot see what you don't know. And that sounds
Yeah,
like really weird, but I see many things that I don't know. No, your brain fabricates something from the things that you know, right?
fill
That
in.
yeah. So that's the fill in. You literally don't see what you don't know. And that goes as far, and I think I brought that into the Dutch podcast and an earlier podcast as well, is where people discovered people who could not see a certain color, and there was a whole tribe, by the way, that could not see the color blue. But they can see the color blue, but they had no word for the color blue, and therefore they didn't see it. And they experimented, literally, Tom, with putting a piece of paper and put all kind of color dots on them, and then all the people in the tribe had to mention the colors of those dots. So it's not only that they pointed to the dot of the color blue and say, I don't know what color that is. They just everyone skipped that point as if it was not there for them. And that needs to make you think like, oh my gosh, I was thinking things like, okay, how would they then see the sky, because we see the sky as the color blue, right? And so yeah, that is very hard to understand. But what's more interesting then is to think about what you and I actually cannot see. I mean, as scary as it is, but there are probably a lot of things around us that we have not in our knowledge, and therefore we don't see them. And that's a little bit of a scary thought, but it's not
Yeah.
actually that complicated. If you look at dancers, And I remember the first dance competition I saw just a lot of people moving, and I thought it was beautiful. That was like the most simple way of doing it. Later on, when I started to take dance lessons, I started to see, oh, they do this, oh, they do that. The more distinction you get, the more mastery in yourself you develop. Instead
and
of, yes, that's what we talk about.
and how faster or in a shorter duration you can perceive the information and see the patterns in it. And if you not know it, you
Yeah.
don't see it.
Yeah,
That's
it, yeah. There is also an answer for that. Why is it that, for instance, you and me can see these things relatively quick, right? It is always relative, right? I use the word relative. It's because we have mentioned these words to ourselves so often. Think about these pathways. We talked about geometrical and organic pathways. Since Ton and I talk about this so much, we see it very quickly whether someone moves geometrical or organic. When you hear it for the first time, then you literally have to look for it. Yeah, and therefore the use of words. We had a whole podcast about that, and keep it simple and very clear defined. That helps you to see things. So if people give a vague definition of what it is, and you can hear it when you can explain it to someone else very clearly, it's really close in your consciousness, and therefore you can see it. I don't think
yeah.
we have ever said that to before in a podcast. Tom, that was pretty good.
Yeah, we have to listen it back, Sean. We have to listen it back.
we
And next week we have somebody interview Lenneke.
yeah,
Uh,
the
yeah,
Dutch
that will be
podcast.
a
Yeah,
Dutch podcast. Yes,
yes,
that
and she's an expert on the use of words and psychology. And but you know, this is a clear example. Everyone would knows that at some point in time, um, you have to do that, and therefore also dance has to be an evolution. Your audience
yes,
and your dancers become more knowledgeable and more skillful, so you see more and you expect more to see, and
yes.
therefore that's
All,
on.
yeah.
Yeah,
Only we don't feel it, Sean, because we learn it,
yeah,
and then when it goes from the short memory term uh, to the long one, then it stays with us. But imagine our cars are not the same anymore like 100 years ago. So these cars are different. The planes are different. Our phones are different. My microphone is different. And
yeah,
still, it is still it gets in quality, it improves, and it improves. So there is a development in it. And also we as human being, we develop also till we die. If you don't want to develop, you stay still, and your time actually go very fast. Um, that's maybe you cannot catch it now, but Sean and I, we understand the model from it. It is also how more you learn in a shorter duration, how slower the time will be. And people cannot catch that, Sean. I I couldn't also catch it first, but now if you have in your daily life you do not a lot and you sit the whole day and you do nothing, you would say the time goes slow. Now, actually, it goes fast because when you are dead at that moment,
yeah.
um, you didn't do a lot in your life. What did you a lot in your life? Then you have perceived in the same time a
Hmm.
lot of
More thing,
more. Yes,
more
more
experience.
things.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, once in a while, you know, you want to do a day of nothing, right? But then at the end of the day, is you actually really think about yourself. What did I do actually today? You know, these 24 hours went by like it was nothing because it was nothing, right? If you have a lot of things to do and you do that with intention, not because you are forced to, but with intention, you have a whole different time perspective. Last time you mentioned this example, I always like this example of the dentist and the patient, right? Where the dentist has to take out a tooth, and the tooth and the patient thinks like, oh my gosh, this took forever because it's so painful, right? And the dentist might think, I think I broke a record. This is the fastest way. So two people have a different perception of time, and Ton and I often talk a little bit more about duration, right? Duration of time
Duration or tempo.
or
Uh,
tempo, and
yeah, or what I said before. Um, what I said from tempo before, from time, your priority or your priorities, because you put them in a different time zone.
yeah,
So not
yeah,
today or yeah tomorrow.
yeah.
But anyway, Sean, I want to explain the relative, because each human being, no, I start with relative and absolute time, because absolute was the time what you said, the dentist, we will be there at 3 o'clock, and relative is actually
The
for the
experience.
patient, the experience was a long time, takes like hours to get that out, that tooth, and for the dentist he break a record there. So it was the fastest what he ever did. So this is then the relative, because each human brain is different, and also the body is different, the physical part, so body and brain. So we come to the fifth dimension model, that's completely different from person to person, from culture to culture, and you cannot expect that somebody will do it when you think they must do it on the dance floor. So these are expectations, and these happens also in daily life. And you cannot fulfill space and time in the expectation. It's not possible. So this is why each person thinks and feels and speaks differently about space and time. This is why you cannot point it exactly there, and also not in a dance competition. It's not possible. Even when you want to make it synchrone or symmetric, everything at the same space and time. If you would zoom in on it or make a video and you put it in slow motion, you will see it's still different in space and in time.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you work a lot with teams and formation teams and stuff like that in dancing. So larger dance groups. Let's make it a little bit more general term. And you have done that with videos and stuff like that. And still, if you look at it, it's still not. But you come to a point where it is for audience without video. They just view it live. They perceive it as at the same time, which is
Yes,
probably the point where you want to go to. Uh,
yes. And again, Sean, to point something out, what you said is
yeah.
to put the attention on it. If your
Hmm.
attention is less,
I
you
like it.
perceive also the information
No,
less.
I like that. I like that. Also, we also discovered, Tom, that if you look at two groups, if the one group is almost at the same time, the audience might say, oh, yeah, they're at the same time. But if the next group is really closer to the real same time, they feel the difference. They say typically thinks it's sharper or it's directer. They use other words than that. So they feel, you cannot see the difference without a video, but you can perceive and feel how that comes across. I mean, you worked hard with your last group on it to get it really precise. And I remember that how many cameras did you had? Like four or five?
No, no, I had 9 or 10
Nine.
cameras,
Wow.
Sean.
And still
Yes,
you had
yes,
differences. Yeah.
and I
Mm.
take all the direction in the camera.
Yeah.
Some of them recorded also already in slow motion,
Yeah.
and I did it from left, right, or say from the directions back, front, left, right, and then the diagonally. Then you have already 8. When you take a top shot, you see the spacing also different, and when you do it low in a different so level. And if you put all this picture and you have somebody who analyze it, even a child could do that, they see the difference in it. Even the dancers wouldn't believe it that they weren't equal. So, and when they look on the video back, they get in shock because they never thought they would be equal. They thought they would be at the same, and it was symmetric or synchrone, but it wasn't. And they improved a lot. And now we come something. Also, your imagination. They go to the competition, and the team who is always first is now always still first. And you would say they would get when they are not in the same time and in the same spacing, say synchrone, you would say they get second. No, they win again. And the other people expect that they will win also because now you fill in already because they win always. They win also now. And this is not fair in judging. That's my opinion because you not look blanco in it. I could say my team was much more even. They were not synchron, but for my eye, much more than the other one because I was trained on it and focused on it because my all my attention goes only to these 2 points, and I try not to fill in, and also I video it and look back. Still, the judge fill in the champion must be champion, and this
Mhm.
is again this 90% of interpretation, and you get still the same result. So, how much more you have to be clear and improved? Yeah, you have to move mountains to change the dancing world, in their opinion. And that's nice too. I'm happy that I understand it now. So, for me, there is no good and wrong. But when people come, yes, this other team was really more synchron. Uh, I don't speak anymore about that one because I have a totally different opinion about it because they didn't do a research on it. They just say something and they fill in what they already filled in
Yeah.
because they had to be
Yeah.
champion.
The
Mhm.
truth is in the eye of the beholder. Huh? That's a common English saying. In their beliefs and their perception, it was so, right? For me, it gets a little bit more problematic when they actually manipulate their own opinion. When they're not honest to themselves and saying, but in very often is what they see, it's their truth. So it's very hard to constantly debate. Now, if it comes to synchronization, you made a study out of it, you made videos of it, you could compare it. If that would be, a qualification in that competition, you were probably right. But in that split moment, even if it was only 4 minutes or whatever, how long that dance is, people already start to see it, because the champions are coming on the floor and they expect to see champions, and they have to be
Yes.
really bad for them to open their eyes and go, wow, it's not that good. But anyhow, and the other way around, if there's a new couple on, a new team on there, or couple, or single dance, it doesn't really matter. They think, yeah, he's new, so so it cannot be, they have to be. Yeah,
Yeah, it's
that is
strange.
that's strange, but
It's,
it is
it's
true.
strange how that works, Sean. Incredible. But when they would know the information what we would know already,
Hmm.
and maybe I don't know the information what they have, sometimes
Me
I
neither.
think we sometimes I think we look totally to two different movies, uh, but still it's there, and I accept it, and I don't now. I don't take it anymore so serious, but have an explanation for myself why people
That's
think
very
like
true.
that.
Yeah.
So the blind one in the seeing world, or how you call that,
Yeah. Well, I think you said it right. We never know what the other people see. And it looks like we sometimes look at a completely different competition or a different group of dancers or different performance on stage. And actually, we already said that is actually true because for 90%, we look at something different. Even you and me, although we synchronize our knowledge quite intensively. And then if Ton and I would sit next together and we decide to look at the same thing, let's say, hey, Ton, let's look at the pathways, then we probably start to see the same things. But if we just sit down and look at this, I can guarantee you we see different things too.
but still we have to talk about it, I think,
Absolutely.
Sean, after it, because I know that I will miss information, and I
Yes.
know you will also miss it.
Yes.
And when we speak about it, we can come
Yes.
to a balance, and
Yes. Yes.
that would be
That's
very nice. Yeah.
yes. Yes. We come to a whole different topic, but this is actually the I don't think we said it before either in this way. This is actually the reason why it would be really wise to talk about it. Not to prove who's right and wrong, just to find balance in the overall opinion of what
The
we see.
perceivers.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes. And another thing, space time, because when you are aware of it, that it could be not the same from person to person, then yeah, then a world goes open. I did it in slow motion, and I practiced this maybe 10 times, and not because the dancers are not so improved or experienced, there was. I let them clap on a metric on the metronome, digital, because this is more exact than the when I would clap, because I'm not so regular. So they clap on it, and for a long time, and we already video it in slow motion.
your mic is off, Tom.
When you video in slow motion, you can
Mm-hmm.
even see it. Uh, you can you can make it even more slower. And what we saw is we had 20 people, that sometimes people were in sync for a short moment, and they were again out of sync, and still the metronome was going, the digital metronome. I was really surprised. But actually, when we look closer, we saw that some people needed more space. So when you need more space, so more volume,
Yeah,
then you need also to be faster to come exactly again on that point.
yeah,
And the space from the hands when you're clapping
yeah.
to the clap, and from the clap, when one person is more bigger,
Mm-hmm.
he has to use the time or the duration or the tempo differently, because he uses a different space.
Yep.
And this, I was so surprised when I record that one, Sean. I can put it in our Facebook group.
Yeah, that would be
Um,
cool. That recording.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, the recording. Um, so if you want to have more information about that, you can visit our group. If you have social media as Facebook, then you can see that. It's really, really interesting, Sean. And
It's
even I thought I know everything, but I didn't. I didn't expect that.
yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah, if we, luckily we work, and I mean, it's a good thing. Don't always think that it's a bad thing, that because we need to work with what we perceive, right? So if we are in the same room and we are in a big ballroom and you are a little bit further off the speakers than I am, I hear sound later than you. So if we
Yes.
talk often about on the beat and off the beat, but that's only perceived value, because first of all, light travels faster than sound, so there is no synchronization between those two, from a sensory point of view. That's only perceived value, right? And what I mean with perceived value, it is actually luckily we cannot see it on that super micro level, because otherwise it would be truly a cacophony of different sounds all together, right? Because even if we're close together, you hear, if you're a little bit closer to the speakers, you will hear the sound sooner than I do. So that means that if I have to move on the same beat, same clap, I will clap just, you know. Luckily, we cannot see it and hear it that way in the world, because that would not be a nice thing to do. But with modern technology, and if you talk about these things to work with it, is actually quite interesting to change
Yes.
our perception in it. And that's what we mostly talk about. Can you do
Yeah.
something on that micro level, although on a top level, on a perceived level, it very often looks, if you talk about synchronization, it looks the same. Uh, but you know, those two things already is mind-boggling, that we actually cannot hear the music at the same time, because we are again not at the same spot.
Yeah.
And that in itself is already it. And that has nothing to do yet. What we had another podcast about is how, you know, how our inner ear works. There's also differences between you and me, Tom.
Mhm.
So many variables, and then we try to all say no, it's like this. Oh no, it's like that. um, we can only talk from our own perception. And if you're really honest and saying, hey, this is how I perceived it, then we can compare. Saying, oh, now that I
Yeah.
hear what you see, I kind of see it too.
Our senses are so important. We think only the eyes and the ears and the feeling and the taste, but all of them, they are important when you judge, and that you focus your body, your physic, and your mental on when you are judge and you then judge a dance competition. The spacing is so important, and the distance from the dancers where you give a judgment to.
Yeah.
And if a judgment do this from a different angle, you get a different perceiving of the information, and also
Yeah.
a different of fill in. So when I would judge, I don't judge anymore because I don't believe in this because that's too strange, because we can never talk about it after it or during the competition. This would be already strange for them that I would talk about it during the competition. But anyway, that's not our subject. I would judge from the same distance each dancer, so I would be more active and walk around the room and not perceive the dancers from different angles, different situations. So this is also spacing, not only for the dancers. It's important that the dancers realize also, and the judges, that space and time has a lot to do how you uh, perceive it and how you
Yeah.
interpret it and fill it in. So there is no objective variables
It's
that all
impossible.
is object. No, it's
Yeah, it's
impossible.
impossible. It's impossible. So yeah, but that's the point of judging. We'll talk about that later. But you know, if you look at things, and if specifically in dance competitions, whether it's the hip hop dance or whatever dance it is, they still measure it on things that are for you and me, where they miss big things. You know, because they don't talk about it. Let me give you an example. Tom, in space time, you know, the word proprioception is really important, and that is how people and body relate to the time, or to the space around them, and in relative to themselves. Once you see that, you can actually give that also a number, but which is actually a in my opinion a more important number, whether the choreography is is right or wrong, right? So is how is the dancer with his intelligence in the proprioception, if you talk
Yeah.
about quality.
Yes.
And you can actually, you could define that if you want to, right?
Yes.
but but we don't do that. We talk still
No.
about musicality, whether they are on the main beat or not. So that
Yes.
for us is a little bit like, really, you know, after all
Yeah.
these years we have not evolved into something
Yes.
to
They drive in the same car like 50 years ago.
yeah, and that is for
That's the
us.
issue.
Yeah, and the dancers they want to move different, but some of the dancers we call it then a little bit conservative. They try to hit these points that other people judge them on, and that is something. I mean,
Yes.
it's a
Can you
if that's what you want, you should do it, but it kind of stops the evolution and growth of dancing altogether.
explain the proprioception, Sean?
Yeah, I
Because
can. I
maybe
use
some
that.
new listeners don't know that.
Yeah,
We had a
pro.
podcast about it.
Yeah,
Mhm.
proprioception is very often, and actually in psychology we call it the sixth sense, right? You have your eye, you have your eyes,
You
and
have
you
your
have
5D and your
yeah,
senses.
we have
Mhm.
the five senses. We know that, right? But the way you relate to the space around you and to in relative to your own body is called proprioceptions, and you need that just to grab a cup of coffee and to not miss it when you grab it or do it too fast. In therefore, it's a space-time element, right? Then my coffee would spill out of my cup. So to do that, and you see actually in mental health that some people struggle with that, people that constantly fall, and they have a little bit, and in the beginning when you see a kid, when they try to grab a glass, it doesn't immediately go really well. So their smaller motoric skills, as we say, are not yet developed, but in reality it is also their proprioception is not on a level where they can relate to the space around them in a way so that they can manage it. There are mental problems who have that, right? People who have a mental issues sometimes have a problem with proprioception. Ton and I will do more work and write more about it in the time to come. I do it very strongly from a mental point of view, but in dancing, it's such an important element, and every time we have to explain it, and it's like we have to explain seeing and hearing and smelling, and this is knowledge that's out there a long time. It's people in the field, they call it the sixth sense. We all have it. It's not like you cannot have it. We all have it, right? But
Mhm.
it's like with seeing, when you help people to see better into the room, mention what you see, you develop their sight, and so you can also help to develop their proprioception.
Yes, I go back to the fundament, actually the beginning, what is important in that,
Hmm.
Sean.
Hmm.
It's actually your proprioception, uh, your 10 body parts, how they bend, um, extend, and rotate
Hmm.
in space time. The 10 body parts. That actually everything that's said, because we spoke already a lot about space time, the directions, the negative, the positive space, the pathway, floor pathway, air pathway, how the 10 body parts move through space in a certain duration, volume, in a certain volume. That's actually the fundament of the proprioception and the 5D, your physic and your mental. So the whole being of you, what you want to become. And you can then customize your 4D actually.
Yeah, what you want to create in there, right? How you
Yes.
Yeah, your movement in dance is just making variations of all these movement that we actually all can do, and depending on your ability. If you just walked on and you just not have a normal swing of your arm, you see that there is a slowdown and an acceleration of your arm constantly. So there are points where it moves faster than your body moves forward in space and time. It's a really interesting thing if you can actually video that. You can see it where it accelerates and then it goes back and it stops for a moment, goes back and it goes. So it goes in completely different tempo and duration than when your body moves in a constant tempo forward in space. Now, that in itself, if you change that a little bit, you do two arms forward and backwards, gives already an interesting movement, so to speak, right? And that's actually how dancing was developed, where we do a little bit things out of the ordinary, um, of normal movement. In the
Mhm.
simplest way, we describe now what dancing is, the variations you have, and you described it in your book so well. If you just only imagine those 10 things that can be three movements, and then with all these variables of time and space, that's unlimited of what you can do. You don't even have to
Yes.
know all the other words.
No, no,
uh,
no.
yeah.
And space-time also interesting is the slices there in it. Because when we have our phone, and I expect that you have maybe a camera there on,
Hmm.
you can record in slow motion. And the slow motion is in frames per second.
Hmm.
And when you have 240 pictures, so frames per second, then each slice is a change of form, about movement, about expression. You can see the change in that one. And maybe you can explain it a little bit more, Sean, about that one, what I said.
Yeah, so basically what you do, it's called FPS, right? Frame per second, and it calls also frame per millisecond, or whatever time you can put it in right now. Depends on your camera, how small you can go. And you make actually more slices. You don't make different slices, right? It's actually, if you have frames per minute, right? Then it's one picture per minute. Frame per second, you have 60 pictures in that same minute, and then you go even smaller than that now that you get just more pictures, and all these pictures together makes your movement. But actually that's still an artificial thing, right? But it helps us to perceive where we go from form to form, and how we change the form from picture to picture. In the past we could only see these big things, and now we can go to the smallest part. But never forget that we can never make a frame per whatever the time duration is that actually hits the reality, because the reality is a constant move. There is no pick. It's only a tool that helps it. Not sure if that's what you wanted to do, but we're getting very close to the end of this podcast, Don, by the way, because it's too interesting to talk about. There was so many things
Yes,
that I.
oh, we can speak. I can speak hours about that one. Very interesting subject, Sean.
Yeah, I think so too.
And and yeah,
Yeah.
I hope you could do something with that information. Perceive it again, so listen again if you want to listen it. Make write it down when you think what is interesting. Never believe us, never trust us. So think for yourself, perceive it for yourself, and make your own conclusions.
Yeah, that's it. And in the spirit of Einstein and Minovsky, is when you see it and when you hear it, it's already gone. And that's what dance is all about. The space we move in might still be there, but the movement itself, what you see, is already gone. So don't
Yes.
try to capture it too much. See it as a constant. Use the tools, to define what you want to do, and then hope to
Do,
see you back in another space and in another time.
yes. And you, yes, that was a nice finish, Sean. And think about you are an artist, a painter in the sky. You paint it and it disappear. That's also one.
Yeah, that's one. That's one. I wrote a poem about it once, so maybe I'll place that in our Facebook group.
Yeah,
That's not a
yeah,
bad
do that.
idea.
That's a fine idea. And I do the video in it
You
with the
can do
clapping
the
there.
clapping video. All right. So this was another episode of Dance Jams. Today we talked about space time. If you have the ability to also listen in Dutch, then you can listen to the same podcast in Dutch with a whole different content. I can guarantee you.
Yeah,
Uh,
but it is never the same. Never.
it's never the same. So Ton, thank you. I'll see you in our next episode.
Yeah.
With that, I'm going to say goodbye, but never before I tell you, of course, where you can find us. Right? I start the music. Bye bye,
Yes.
Ton.
Goodbye, Sean. Goodbye, listener.
Yeah, this was an episode of Dance Jams. Today we talked about space time. We hope that made it a little bit more clear, or maybe we confuse you even more. Who knows, right? It's the invisible dimension. I'm sure we'll talk about it more in the future. You can always find it on Spotify, Dance Dash Jams, or on Apple. The same thing, Dance Dash Jams. We have a podcast channel, is also called Dance Jams, of course. And under the same name, jam.dance/podcast, you can find us also on our website. And with that, we say bye bye.
Goodbye.